Archaeologists recently published a study analyzing 80,000-year-old lithics from Uzbekistan, and they believe they've identified the world's oldest known arrowheads, potentially pushing back the emergence of bow and arrow technology by thousands of years. And the coolest part? These arrowheads may not have even been made by our own species. Who made them? And how does this discovery shift our understanding of our deep prehistoric past? I'm Madam Archaeologist, your go-to informant on everything archaeology, and in this episode, I want to go over this discovery and discuss its implications for our understanding of prehistory, essentially how these challenge current held beliefs. The tools I'm discussing here come from the rock shelter site of Obi-Rakhmat in northeastern Uzbekistan, and as I mentioned, they are about 80,000 years old, which places them within the Middle Paleolithic period. 20 pieces from the deepest layers, levels 20 and 21, were regarded by the research team as projectile armatures. The researchers inspected these tools further and identified 3 particular types of projectile armature among the 20 chosen pieces. We have bladelets, we have what have been variously called large or massive points, retouched points, or large retouched points in the paper, and then we have micropoints, the most interesting of all the pieces, because the study concluded that they were most likely arrowheads. They weigh, on average, 1.4 grams among the broken points, they are tiny in size, most have sustained impact damage, and they could have only been mounted on arrow-like shafts, specifically by gluing them. Arrow shafts have a diameter of 7 to 8 millimeters, any thicker or thinner and the arrow will not perform optimally. Doing some calculations, the researchers established that the Obi-Rakhmat micropoints could have been mounted on shafts with a potential maximum diameter of 7.5 to 8 millimeters. This matches what we know about arrow shaft dimensions. The researchers write that, in the context of the Obi-Rakhmat lithic industry, regarding the micropoints as arrowheads is the working hypothesis most compatible with the fundamental principles of hunting weapon design and with the available experimental references, end quote. In other words, saying that the micropoints functioned as arrowheads is the interpretation that is best supported by the evidence and hunting knowledge. Now, if you read some of the news articles that have been written on this discovery, you'll see that the researchers expect some skepticism towards their study because the bows and shafts themselves haven't been found. But at the same time, roughly 61 to 64,000-year-old quartz tools from Sibudu Cave in South Africa were not found alongside bows or shafts, which rarely survive in the archaeological record actually, and yet the interpretation that is widely regarded as most likely is that they functioned as early arrowheads. This is because the interpretation was based on the scientific analysis of the tools. The suggestion that the Obi-Rakhmat micropoints were most likely arrowheads is, likewise, grounded in an analysis of the points. The researchers aren't merely speculating here. Whoever was making the micropoints in Uzbekistan 80,000 years ago was making them with a purpose in mind, and the study here shows that the only compatible purpose was their use as arrowheads. If we say that these are arrowheads, as the analysis suggests, what does this imply for the human story? What changes? For one, it pushes back the use of bow and arrow technology by thousands of years, and it shifts the focus on the earliest evidence for such to a whole new region of the world. The oldest evidence for bow and arrow hunting was previously attested in the archaeological record very far away from Central Asia, all the way in East and South Africa. In South Africa, we have the roughly 61 to 64,000-year-old bone and quartz points from Sibudu Cave, and we also have approximately 71,000-year-old microliths from Pinnacle Point that are possibly arrowheads, although these are more controversial, and regardless, they are still about 9,000 years younger than the Obi-Rakhmat points. In East Africa, research at the site of Shinfametema 1 suggests that 74,000-year-old stone points probably function as arrowheads too, but these are, again, still younger than the points from Obi-Rakhmat. Another mind-blowing finding is that the closest parallel to the Obi-Rakhmat micropoints are those excavated from Grotte-Mondrian in France, thousands of kilometers away from Obi-Rakhmat. You may have heard about Grotte-Mondrian already, especially if you've seen my episode on the DNA of the last Neanderthal. But Neanderthals are not the only hominins to occupy the rock shelter. There were Homo sapiens there as well. The Grotte-Mondrian micropoints are about 54,000 years old, so they are also considered Middle Paleolithic. They are not the oldest arrowheads in the world, but they are identical to the Obi-Rakhmat points, and they also feature impact damage. This suggests that people could have stopped in Central Asia before making their way to Europe, or at least that people in Central Asia and those in Europe or surrounding regions were interacting and sharing ideas during the Middle Paleolithic period. The striking similarity between the micropoints at Obi-Rakhmat and those from Grotte-Mondrian also adds support to the interpretation that the Obi-Rakhmat micropoints were indeed arrowheads, as the micropoints from Grotte Montran were independently interpreted as arrowheads as well. One of the biggest questions that still needs answering is, who made the Obi-Rakhmat micropoints? It is an important question to ask because there is a major debate in academia. Archaeologists, biological anthropologists, geneticists, they all have their own opinions on how cognitively advanced different hominin species were, namely Homo sapiens versus Neanderthals. Now, the invention of the bow and arrow is supposed to be unique to our species and signals higher level cognitive functioning. Creating a bow and arrows requires intricate planning and preparation, and their use ultimately allows people to hunt from longer distances. People can also hide and not be as visible to prey, so sorting out who made the Obi-Rakhmat arrowheads is of great significance to the study of early human cognition. It is, of course, completely possible that the Obi-Rakhmat arrowheads were made by Homo sapiens, because we know our species is capable of crafting such weapons. And if we can conclusively establish a purely Homo sapiens link here, then this has important implications for the debate on the cognitive development of our own species as well. The main debate surrounds whether our modern cognition developed gradually over time with the body, or whether there was a sudden cognitive revolution, a big leap during the Upper Paleolithic. And bow and arrow technology in the preceding Middle Paleolithic does not lend support to the Upper Paleolithic cognitive revolution scenario. If the Obi-Rakhmat points were made purely by anatomically modern humans, then this also prompts us to rethink the invention and adoption of bow and arrow hunting technology. We have two possibilities. One, that arrows were invented independently by members of our own species more than once in different regions, or two, that people invented arrows following an earlier out of Africa migration and then the concept spread to the African continent via back migration. The Middle Paleolithic archaeological material in Eurasia and the broadly corresponding Middle Stone Age material in Africa is way too incomplete for us to draw any solid conclusions right now. Another option is that the Obi-Rakhmat micropoints were the work of the Neanderthals. Their known range included Europe, West Asia, Central Asia, and Siberia, and they were still around 80,000 years ago, with current dating work suggesting that they went extinct around 40,000 years ago. And we also know that they were specifically in Uzbekistan during the Middle Paleolithic. However, Neanderthals are not known to have made arrowheads. Like I said, this has traditionally been regarded as a uniquely anatomically modern human invention, and given that we lack comparable material from known Neanderthal sites, it is reasonable for one to question a purely Neanderthal origin for the Obi-Rakhmat points. But until more evidence emerges, I would keep the possibility in mind. And if Neanderthals did indeed invent arrowheads independently of Homo sapiens, this would shift the debate on Neanderthal cognition in a new direction. That said, if the Obi-Rakhmat arrowheads were actually made by Neanderthals, they need not necessarily have been invented by them. Bow and arrow technology could have been invented even earlier by Homo sapiens, who then transferred the knowledge to other hominin species they encountered. You can see just how complicated drawing interpretations about the invention and spread of ideas in the remote past can be. Alternatively, a group of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens hybrids could have made them. I'm particularly interested in this latter possibility because human remains have been found at Obi-Rakhmat. And although this come from a later layer at the site, meaning that this individual lived after the arrowheads studied here were made, analyses of this individual's fragmented remains tell us that any of the three scenarios I have outlined above are possible. Here's why. The remains include teeth and skull fragments, and they correspond to one child. And while the dentition better matches Neanderthals, the fragmented skull is more ambiguous, making it possible that this child could have been a Neanderthal sapiens hybrid, although we will need nuclear DNA to test this. And even though the child's remains are not associated with the 80,000-year-old stone tools, these observations are interesting because they tell us that Neanderthals, or Neanderthal sapiens hybrids, could have been at the site, making it possible that Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, or hominin hybrids were the manufacturers of these weapons. We cannot conclude anything with certainty with the fragmentary evidence we have at the moment, and we need to keep our minds open to a few different possibilities. It appears we have yet another mystery in the human story that needs to be solved. I'm also curious to find out if there are any micropoints in other layers of the site, to find out just how temporally widespread the use of the technology at Obi-Rakhmat was. And no matter who made the 80,000-year-old micropoints, these objects hint to us that people in the remote past, and perhaps even other hominins, may have been more advanced than we might like to think. To quote the archaeologist Christian Tryon, we consistently underestimate the abilities of our ancestors. That's it for this episode. As usual, if you have any thoughts, feel free to leave a comment, subscribe for more cool content, where I go to informant on everything archaeology, Madam Archaeologist.